Hey everyone, welcome back to My Life History. As always, I'm Bryan Flannery, and I'm really excited about today's guest. We have an author, speaker, former first responder, and really an advocate for all first responders out there who are struggling, Mr. Adam Davis.
What's up, my friend? don't
Man,
don't
thank
don't
you so
build me
much.
up.
Oh man, I don't have to. I don't have to.
I
You've done a
appreciate you
great
having
job
me
of
on,
that.
man. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me on. I really appreciate it.
absolutely, man. Thank you for joining me. And, you know, now as an author and speaker and all these great things and all these things that you're doing that you're really passionate about, it looks awesome. But I kind of want to go back. I want to go back to where it all started. So just tell me a little bit about what life looked like growing up.
Yeah. Um, it was pretty normal to start with, and there were other moments where it seemed normal. I don't know if y'all remember, some of y'all may, but they used to have catalogs, like physical catalogs that you could sit down and I remember going through these catalogs and just really innocent, didn't know any better, and I'd circle what I want, like circle what I wanted, and I felt like that if I circle what I wanted, I could sit there and imagine it long enough, and it would just appear, and that it would appear on Christmas morning, and then I'd circle this stuff, and then on Christmas morning it just appeared. I'm like, holy crap, this is awesome. And there were some things that I didn't get, but I was so blessed. I was so blessed to have a dad who loved me and that God put other people around me. Um, you know, and my mom and dad divorced when I was around 5 years old, and then um, that's not uncommon, not even then.
Right.
But she started working more, and I was left with a neighbor who was an older male, and it started off pretty normal again. Let me watch Looney Tunes, the good cartoons, and
Yeah.
eat a bunch of trashy cereal and play outside. And one day he put in a VHS tape that was pornography, and
Mm.
I can I can vaguely remember some of the scenes. It doesn't affect me, but I can remember how he would respond to certain scenes, certain things that he would do based on what was going on, and then it wasn't long that he began to do to me stuff that we were seeing on TV in some shape, form, or fashion, and I'll save you and spare you all the gory details, but it was not, it was much more than him just fondling me. It was awful, and
Yeah.
it was something I carried for a long time, and I was an awkward kid after that. Probably, I remember when I met my stepbrothers for the first time. They met me, and I wanted to fish. Um, so I had this little red wagon, and it had like rained really hard, so we had water in the ditch. So I grabbed a limb off the tree and put my red wagon in the ditch where the water would just come up to it, and I sat in the red wagon pretending I was fishing. And that's how we met. They were like, "This dude, what is he doing, man? What is he
That's awesome.
doing?" But fear had a grip. It had a stronghold on me from the beginning, and by all definitions, I should have been, you know, um, really, really, really messed up. Now, I'll tell you, I was messed up, just not to the point to where a clinician would look at it and say, "Yeah, he's psychotic, or he's this, or he's that." I mean, I should have had all sorts of things, but He preserved me, and I'm so grateful. But that wouldn't be the last time. It happened again as a teenager. My relationships, dating relationships,
Yeah.
as a teenager were they were not healthy, even though I was going to church. Um, I was dropped off as a 15-year-old boy, teenager, with a woman who was in her 30s, married, that was a worship leader in the church, and she was supposed to babysit me. I think we could redefine that term, um, something different than babysitting a 15-year-old, because I don't really know why I needed babysitting, but nevertheless. and she'd make me strawberry daiquiris with Bacardi, and we'd have sex, and that went on for uh, a long time throughout the day, and for about a year. My dad gave me a vehicle, and it was this really stunning, like mint green Geo Metro hatchback, 5 speed. I'd have to rip the seat out and sit in the back seat to drive it now, but it got like 60 miles to the gallon, dude. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it was stud mobile. So I left as soon as I started driving. I started going to a different church than where I was having to go at the time, and called my dad one night. I locked my keys in my car, and he come up to help me, and I got in the truck with him. I said, "Listen, I need your help," and he's like, "That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here."
Yeah.
And I said, "No, you don't understand." I started telling him everything. So dad moved to protect me. I was pretty jacked up. My perspective of healthy relationships, I was having sex outside of marriage. Um, I did not have a healthy view of relationships, and didn't have a healthy view of church, didn't have a healthy perspective of who God was. I saw him as somebody ready to put his hand on a red button and destroy me, because all I had known for most of my life was pain. When you're 8, 9, 10 years old and you still can't control bowel movements, you develop a speech impediment. Kind of makes you pretty weird.
Yeah.
And God has preserved me. So that all the teenage stuff ended when I was about 16, and then my senior year in high school, um, I met this beautiful, beautiful young lady, and I was trying to get into the military, um, and they wouldn't have me. It's probably like they said it was my ear, but if I had to go back and analyze it, they probably had some kind of psyche eval, and they could probably tell that I had been through some stuff, and they didn't want to take a
Sure.
risk on me. But they said I had hearing loss in my left ear from a cyst that I had on my eardrum. They removed, left a hole in my eardrum, whatever. So that was my dream. First dream that I had to bury was being in the military. Didn't work. Didn't happen. And I tried for like 5 years, and they were like, "Hey, we'll call you. We'll call you."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I got married at 18, and felt like I had a
Well,
life by the horns. And that, you know, I don't regret marrying my wife. I'd marry her again in a heartbeat. Marry a day earlier so I could spend more time with her. But boy, I wish I'd have known how jacked up I was, so I could have been well for her. So that's a little bit
yeah.
about my childhood.
Yeah. And let me ask you this. So you get married at 18, and at that time, would you say that the trauma that you had suffered as a child that then kind of led to um, more trauma as a teenager
Hmm.
mixed with bad decisions, whatever, however you want to phrase that is fine. Like they're both true, right? And so, but let me ask, as you're getting married, you're marrying your wife, you're coming alongside your wife. Would you say that that trauma in your past had been resolved? Like, had you dealt with it at that point?
Absolutely, 100%, unequivocally, no.
Hmm.
I told her
Yeah.
about the stuff, but here's one of my downfalls, and it's, it can be crushing. Is that um, I've tried to carry stuff even from a very young age. I've tried to be strong. I've tried to carry stuff on my own because I didn't want to burden others with it. That's been one of the biggest things for me. I don't want to tell you about my problems because I know you've got enough of your own. I don't want to burden you with it. I
Sure.
knew that I knew other people in my life were going through crap. I didn't want to burden them with it. My dad was really the only person that I felt at the time when all that crap was going on that I could tell him about it. And there were others who didn't want to validate it. They didn't want to believe it. They were in denial because it was people they were really close to. But when I told Amber about it before we got married, she was like, you know, she empathized with me, and she listened to me. But I look back and I feel like I cheated her because I didn't know how messed up I was. I didn't know what a healthy relationship looked like. I didn't know what it meant to work through conflict in a healthy way. Um, and just a lot of stuff. I mean, but at the end of the day, I was still 18. There was a whole lot I didn't know, much less the trauma that I had dealt with and pretend it didn't exist. And that's a lot of it. Pretend it doesn't exist, ignore it
Right.
until one day it jumps up on you and you're on the mat. And so Yeah, no, it was not resolved to answer your question. It was not
Yeah.
resolved.
So you have this unresolved trauma. You marry your wife. Your dream of being in the military is kind of thrown. It's taken out of your grip. Like I
Yeah.
always think of that old commercial where you got the gentleman with the fishing pole and the dog. And he's like, "Oh, thought you had it, right? Like you thought you
Yeah.
were going to do the military. They take that from you, and so of course, because I know you and I know parts of your story and I've read your books, and so you ended up in law enforcement. And so let me ask, how did you go from 18-year-old kid, newly married, uh, kind of running from trauma to law enforcement?
So I my early years of being married, I'd bounce from job to job to job, like
Yeah,
seeking fulfillment, trying to find my identity, to feel like a man, and just to kind of earn my stripes. And so
sure,
I've worked in banking. I worked in. I learned to have a great deal of respect for pregnant women. I worked in the drive-through with three women that were pregnant all at the same time. And man, I I I have so much compassion and empathy, and I also know to keep my mouth shut around them because they will attack you. But anyway, I did that, and then I worked in I was working. I had this company come along and recruit me to sell some type of life insurance, and so I was making like $6 an hour at the bank. And this company come along and they were like, "We're going to pay you $2,500 a month." Sweet. We're going to pay you minimum 2,500 a month. I'm like, this is a great deal, great opportunity. And so I took it. In the first month, they had only paid me like $500 or something like that. And so I think our rent at the time was probably $800 a month for this little apartment we were in. And so that was a big dadgum deal, man. Things were kind of,
yeah,
hey, there's no money. And so I went to work as an ironworker laborer building combined steam power plants. And so I was just literally the guy who was hanging off the side of the structure with a grinder, grinding welds or filling water
oof,
tanks, whatever, just the dirty work.
yeah,
And so I was making $10 an hour, but I have to drive an hour and a half to work, and I drive an hour and a half back. And I got into construction back at home, got into pest control, and that's kind of where I stayed until law enforcement. But I was in pest control working for a company in Auburn, Alabama, covering most central part of Alabama, commercial pest control. And my wife called me one day and she said, "Hey, Addison, our oldest son, has eaten all of my birth control pills," and she was freaking out, completely freaking out. I said, "Well, call 911. I'll be on the way." And so gets 911 on the phone. They get poison control on the phone. They're like, "This is not going to affect you or affect him at all. He's going to be fine. He may have a little nausea, but he's going to be fine." They did not tell us how it was going to impact her. And ta-da, our third child came along about a month later. We found out he was going to be, yeah. So um, that was Andrew. He made a grand entrance. So about a month later, we found out she was pregnant. I came home, started working for a smaller pest control company, and in March of '09, I think it was March 5th of '09, they fired me, and they fired me, and you know, I I was a service manager, pretty young guy, service manager over a team, and one of the owner's sons kept coming to work late, and I just can't stand it. So
right,
went to the owner. I'm like, "What do you want me to do?" He was like, "What would you do if anybody else?" I said, "Fire him." So I fired him, and then they fired me and hired him back. And just so happened the
wow,
day they fired me was my oldest son's fifth birthday. So
wow,
I got to go home when everybody's having cake and balloons and having a good time. Let them know, hey, I'm fired. So whatever. And so I started washing cars and cutting grass and cleaning horse stalls and um, doing whatever I could, whatever I could. And one day, the pastor of the church we were a part of at the time, it was a church launch, church plant. He's former Marine, and he and a businessman sat me down in a little town of Luverne, Alabama, and he asked me like, who do you want to be? My dad, being around my dad a lot after I got out of school, he was always around law enforcement, just nature of his work, uh, auto collision repair, tow trucks, wrecker service, you name it. I mean,
Sure.
he's around them a lot, and so I'd seen these men from a distance, and I knew that they were solid men. If you need them, they're there. They got good families, good character, and I want like I admired them, man. I wanted to be like these guys. And so this pastor uh, said, "What do you want to be? Who do you want to be?" And I told him, I've always felt called to be a pastor. And he said, "Dude, you're such a cop out." He said, "Who do you want to be?" And I said, "I want to be a cop." And he said, "Well, then grow some, I'll say courage, and go be a cop." and so, uh, I did. And fall of that year, I'd already applied for a few positions in law enforcement, or for a few different agencies. And so,
Sure.
um, that fall, I raised my right hand and swore in and become a police officer in Southeast Alabama, and felt like I'd spend the rest of my life there. So
Wow.
that's how I
And
got into law enforcement from 18-year
yeah,
old kid.
and that's the end of the story, right? Life was gumdrops and rainbows since then. There was never any other problems.
It may have been for somebody else.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
so
it may have been for somebody else, but it was not gumdrops and rainbow. Now, I had a blast in academy and pre academy training. I had a blast, but and I'd go back through it again. I'd do it
right.
again, but no, it was not all gumdrops and rainbows.
Yeah. So you get through the academy, you're on the I don't know what it's called. I'm not a law enforcement person, but I think it's called the beat, right? You're on the beat. Is that right? No?
Well, I mean, it's different places, but I come out of law. I came out of the academy and was assigned to night shift patrol, and so I worked patrol for a while.
Yeah. So you're on patrol. Um, you're on patrol. You're living now at this time. How are things at home? Right? How we had talked earlier about some unresolved trauma. We had talked earlier about bad decisions, then your children, then kind of the jobs. And so let me ask this: like that unresolved trauma now as a police officer as well on a night patrol. How are things at home? How are you dealing with things?
Oh, they're fine because I just pretended they didn't exist. And
Yeah,
it's like if you have mold growing in your home, you can pretend it doesn't exist. You can pretend it doesn't exist until one day it's a major problem. Or a more realistic example is walking through the pasture gate and there's a nest of yellow jackets in the ground and you're deathly allergic to them, and you walk by and you keep ignoring it until one day they don't like you being there anymore and they attack you. I mean,
yeah,
I just pretended it didn't exist. I pretended it was there, and like not nothing to deal with. Like I'm a man, whatever. Like I'm probably the only person that's ever been through this crap. 'Cause we don't talk about it. Like it's taboo. We're weak, and people still label it. People still label me, dude.
sure,
You're weak. You're not even a man because you talk about this stuff. You're not supposed to talk about it. Shut up. Quit whining. Suck it up. Move on. And my challenge to that is mind your own business. If that's the way you want to be about it, if that's the way you want to handle it, you handle it that way. But I'm on a mission
sure,
to save lives. I'm on a mission to set people free. And if sharing my junk will be a key to somebody else's prison cell that they're living in their head, then I'll continue to do exactly this. In fact, I may get even more raw about it. And I want to continue to piss people off who get uncomfortable with vulnerability, because that's what it's going to take. Because I remember who I needed at that time, and I couldn't find that person. I needed somebody that
yeah,
I could say, "Hey, this is what I'm going through. This is what I'm dealing with. This is what's happened, and this is how I'm dealing with it." So I drink. I drink. I started going to squad parties. I started going to all the other stuff, and home life was fine. I mean, we had um, three fairly young children, 5, 3, and a newborn. So, yeah, it was home life was kind of chaotic because I'm working night shift. She's trying to keep them, quiet during the day while I sleep. But it worked out, man. I mean, it was not. I put it this way: there's not a single difficulty from that time frame that outshadows the beautiful moments in the
Wow.
early years. I can tell you that.
Man, I don't know about you, but hearing Adam and his vulnerability, his transparency, as he said, talking about his junk, this first episode has been absolutely fantastic. Make sure that you come back next week to My Life, His Story to hear the rest of Adam's story.